Hey, this is the World Advice Channel 2. What I want to talk about today is the question of what would happen if Africa was never colonized. So for this video, I'll discuss a realistic scenario of what would happen if Africa was never colonized in a simple and straightforward way so anyone can understand it, as well as not just understand it, but make it actually possibly, well, not even possibly, but actually speak of what would have happened in a realistic way, okay? With no BS. So now I mentioned that, let's get started. So when it comes to the topic of what would happen if Africa was never colonized, the first question that comes up to people's minds is that would Africa be doing good? Now, the simple answer to that question, believe it or not, when it comes to what we define as good, like actually developed and stuff, at least to a certain extent, and so on and so forth, the answer to that question is yes. I do believe Africa would have developed, um, to a certain extent. Okay. I do believe there would be African nations that were actually rich and powerful and just actually successful for that matter. Okay, to be blunt with you. So that is the truth of the matter when it comes to answering that question. Now, the reason why I believe this scenario, of course, is simply down to the fact that when Europeans, of course, colonized Africa, they actually brainwashed Africans, a lot of Africans, not all, thank God, but they brainwashed a lot of Africans to thinking that they're stupid and to also, as well as encouraging them to have a way of thinking that is simply untrue, okay? As well as the fact that they also destroyed a lot of historical monuments, which I'll get to more later for that matter, that made them forget who they are. And they did a lot of things that economically just screwed up the nations in Africa, okay, for that matter, okay? Because that's the truth about what happened when Europeans colonized Africa, is that they did a lot of things that destroyed Africa as we know it today. As or I should say, in other words, for it to be like it is today, okay? Not only did they, of course, narrow the amount of time they could have obviously recovered from slavery, it's also true that not only did they also narrow the period of time in honesty they could have recovered from slavery, Africa for that matter, they also created a scenario where they made it as hard as possible, as well for them, to actually, reap the rewards of the resources that they had. Which the truth of the matter is, if Africa was actually, of course, under the hands of Africans, and they never were colonized, I truly believe they would have recovered and they would have been developed. Now, to be realistic here, do I believe they would have been like Europe? At least some nations in Africa, for that matter, be like Europe. I don't. I wouldn't go that far. I don't believe Africa would be as developed as Europe. But one thing I do know for certain is they would definitely, with absolute certainty, at least be maybe on the level of like Southeast Asia or maybe even Eastern Europe, for that matter, when it comes to development. Um, Personally, to be realistic here, when it comes to the development, okay? Because the truth of the matter is, and this is the point I was getting at before when I mentioned that African civilization thing, which I'm going to get to now, is that many people don't understand about Africans is that Africans are not stupid. They're not a stupid people. The truth about Africans is that Africans are actually, surprise, 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 just as smart as any other racial group on the face of the planet. It's just that the problem with Africans, for that matter, is that when it comes to Africans, you know, um, aside from maybe certain belief systems when it comes to work that kind of gets in the way, the truth of the matter is, you know when it comes to Africans, is that Africans have the ability to develop their own nations, for that matter, okay? Because the thing is, Africa did have civilizations before, okay, in the past, a long time ago. They did have civilizations. Because even when you look at the history of slavery, it's easily estimated that 20 million, and that's considered the lightest estimate, of Africans died for in the 400 to 500 years of the transatlantic slave trade, okay? For 20 something million Africans. And anyone who knows basic degree about history and civilization is that if all of Africa was extremely underdeveloped and didn't have civilizations, particularly we're all hunter-gatherer societies, which a lot of people stereotype them as being, then Africa would not have had that many people. Hunter-gatherer societies don't have very many people because first and foremost, obviously it comes out of basic common sense. They live harder lives and so on and so forth. So it's harder for them to, of course, have kids and so on and so forth. It's also just down to basic common sense. When people live together, it's it obviously the population kind of builds up more naturally because there's more people, there's more resources, and so on and so forth. To sum it up, there are much higher population numbers for that matter because people are all clustered together in certain particular areas instead of course, being clustered in over a wide span of an area for that matter, okay? For that matter, okay? Truth be told, so as a result, they're able to, of course, grow more food and keep more people and all that type of shit, okay, for that matter, okay? So the truth of the matter is Africa did absolutely, even from that number itself, did have its civilizations. Not to mention there was written accounts of them deliberately trying to destroy African civilization. So in short, African people are not stupid. They could definitely have their own have their own civil. They've already had their civilizations. They could have created nations that were developed. The truth of the matter is when it comes to Africa, uh, I mean, in all honesty, when it comes to Africa, for that matter, Africa could have become developed. It's just simply was not able to because Europeans, of course, got in the way and screwed everything up. For that matter, and even to this day, it's also kind of suspicious why Africa's not doing it good, especially when you consider all the fact that in some way, somehow, mysteriously, all African leaders who talk about change and seem to actually genuinely care, some way, somehow, all manage to die in plane crashes. And also the fact that it's a well-known established fact that African nations have been deliberately disabled, deliberately fucked up by the CIA because they didn't agree with America's foreign policy beliefs, just like they did in Latin America too. So what does that tell you? So the truth of the matter is, without those influences, America would have actually had a run for its money when it comes to it being developed, because Africa would have done very well, and maybe not in a short term, like maybe like in this time in an alternate timeline by this time period. But one thing I know for certain is the long run, it would have been very rich and definitely would have had a much bigger say in the world. Because obviously, when you have a part of the world that has the most amount of resources, you're going to have a lot of power, for that matter, because you have a lot of resources that everyone needs, especially since we live in an electronic age for the past like 150 something years. Everything uses electricity in some way, shape, or form. You obviously need the minerals to do that, and Africa has that. So, to answer your question in short, I believe Africa would have developed. Some nations would have become developed. I don't think I would go as far as say it would be on the level as of European nations like France, Germany, Britain, but they would definitely for certain be doing a lot better than they are doing now. And that's one thing I can say for certain. So anyway, this is my video. This is off to say. I hope you enjoyed this video as well as found informative. And just remember, if you like videos like this, remember to thumb this video up and hit a subscribe button. And this is off to say. And simply put, I'm out. So bye.